Hello, I'm going to be teaching you how to use remote events, specifically to make special effects with your cameras. If you're completely new to Studio, I suggest you go learn how to do Studio. I recommend buying one of the books or doing one of those YouTube series. I personally think the books are the best. Okay, let's get started. Alright, first things first, you need to know what server side and client side mean. So server side is where the server is being taken place. Basically, there's a workspace for the server and one for every single player that's connected. And only you can see client-sided stuff. So if there's something in the server but it's not in your client, you cannot see it. And the reason why the server exists is because of the main reason exploiters can't touch it, but exploiters can manipulate your client side. And number two, client you want sometimes you want to have effects that only appear for one player. Say if you want a player to be affected by a black screen after they die, you want it to only happen to one person and not everyone. If you replicate things on a server, a screen effect, it will replicate to every single player by default because the client side tends to copy almost everything from the server. So now that we've gotten that clear, now how remote events work is remote events are signals that you can send to. The client side could send a signal to the remote event, which will allow the server to pick up on that signal and do something. Now, the problem with this is, as you can see, since there's multiple client sides, if a server sends a signal, it would every client-sided like place would also pick up on that signal. That's why you need to filter it out using parameters and arguments to only specify that only one player has to be affected. Though, if you really want to, there is a method that allows you to fire a signal for every client side, and every client side script can pick up on. But yeah, that's the difference between server side and client side. Well, in the relevance of this video. Alright, the first and most obvious application of using remote events is to apply an effect to a target player. So right here, I have this block, and when you touch it, makes you zoom in, just like in the showcase. So how do I pull this off is, first, you need to make it a remote event. And I'm gonna put it right in replicated storage. Okay, most all your remote events must be placed in replicated storage or replicated first. Actually, no, it's just replicated storage. And this is the only place where remote events will function properly that I know of. And how this works is once you get your remote event, you go to your script, and what you want to do is first you select the screen or you get the remote event object, which I've selected with this portion here, and you use the method fire client if you're on the server. And fire client has one required argument, which is which player client you want to fire. And you have to put in the player object. So the player object is this thing right here inside your players. Under players, this is the player object. And you have to get that. And how I got that is when someone touches the brick, it will return me the part. Then I get the player name off the part if it has a humanoid, and if it's in players. If the name of the player character is also in players, that's how I know if it's an actual player that touched it. And that means if it is an actual player, we get its name because we know that the part touched is one of the player's body parts. Then we get the parent of that, which has to be the player character, and we get the name, and that is our player character name. And then we get to players use find first child and then putting in the player character name, which shares the same name as the player object that we want to affect. And then the second parameter can be anything. This is to use to send information to the client, like whatever information you might need that the client needs to function. And now that we've gotten our server side, we need to somehow get our client side to respond to this. And how the client side responds to this is I put a client or local script instead of our starter character scripts. And like the server script, you have to get the object, okay, in replication storage, GD zoom. And it has to be the same object you sent the signal to. When you send a signal to an object, it gets sent through that object, and it needs to be picked up by the script using that same object. That's how you make unique and different signals. So now that you've got it, you have to. It is an event, so you have to use a dot and not a method. And once you use a dot, you can connect it to a function. And if you do specify second parameters in your server script right here, I specified a 2 after putting in the player argument. Putting an argument here will get the second argument I got from here, which is 2. And since I got this argument, this second argument I used was for the tween info, how long the zooming effect will last. And I make it last 2 seconds. If you want to learn how to tween, watch like level 2 of my video or watch someone else's tweening video. And then once I get this client event, it will connect to this function and play this function right here for the client, which affects only me and the other people can't see it. And that's basically it. Now that I've shown you how to use a server to client side remote function to make your camera zoom in just for the player, I'm going to apply it to my latest tool that I made, which is the dust dash move, or dust dash. This move, I'm going to make the camera zoom in. And all I have to do is get the remote event that I synced it to, or for the local script, which is going to be the same dashing, the same zooming in thing. So I don't need to make another remote event to make a different signal channel to send to the local script, since I'm just making it zoom in the same as the demonstration. And since I'm doing a server to client and affecting one client, since I already know what my character name is from this script, which you should see the video for, how I made this entire thing, I don't have to worry about it accidentally activating other local scripts, as this will filter it out for me. So the zoom in effect will occur right as I dash. All I have to do is get the object, fire client. I already have the player object or the player name, so I just find it using find first child character.name. And then put in my second argument, which is required because in the local script, it uses the second parameter, which becomes time here. So in order to run this function, which requires time to run, as it uses it for the tween info line. Now if I test this out, oh, maybe it should be a little faster. .5. There we go. And that's how you can apply it to a move. Now, if you want to apply it to an opponent, you can just use a hitbox script, and then get the player model, get the player object from the player model, and then fire a client signal for a script to run an effect for your victim. And that's how you use remote event. Alright, thank you for watching. Bye bye.